Okay, the red dot's on. I can see it this morning.
I can see it as well. Welcome to the Broker Loaded podcast, everybody. I'm Kurt Studley. I'm a realtor.
And I'm Dan Grimes. I am also a realtor.
That's Courtney Anderson. He's not a realtor.
He is not. He's our guest today. And Courtney, you are?
I'm a financial planner, and I work with families on the wealth management side in preserving wealth and helping them to make the most of their money.
So you're an advisor, financial planner. You've worked at banks. You've worked at other financial institutions of various sorts.
Yep.
Right.
Worked with two major banks over the last 25 years. I've worked with business owners.
Right.
Yeah. And I'll say probably what brought a lot of this up was I noticed there's a gap, and I hear my family saying it, and I hear others saying it. We've got kids out there saying they can never afford to buy a house.
The Broker Loaded podcast, by the way, is a podcast all about real estate, basically, and this ties directly into real estate because financial education is something that is lacking, and we've talked about this before we started this podcast today. There is a problem, a long existing problem. I mean, I look back at high school and university and so on and so forth. If there were courses available, I wasn't aware of them. But imagine if you had a standard in a curriculum in maybe junior high and high school and so on and so forth, where you could educate people financially and how to manage money. And that just doesn't exist, right?
It's not there. There's a few volunteer groups that go into some of the high schools that are attempting to get this knowledge out there.
Right.
But it can make as much as 40% difference. So imagine your first 100,000. If I were to tell you you could, through financial literacy, have 140,000.
Yeah.
We're not talking an insignificant amount.
No.
So moving the dial 40% just through understanding how to invest and how to use your money and how to save and how to budget.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of people out there who have educated themselves, and there are people who I think have that ability to understand finances and how to save and how to do. I think they're few and far between, but there are people who have that natural ability. For the most part, though, if you're like me, a regular guy, and like you, we don't have that basis for understanding how to get ourselves in financially stable and well off, let's say, and in a good position throughout your life because we didn't get that education.
Yeah, today, and in my household, I'm a living example of it too, because I know Courtney and I know the age of his three kids. Like typically a 17 or 18-year-old now, like my son came to me when he was 17, he was interested in the stock market. Mm-hmm. And as I've seen him progress, sure, they learn. I capped it at $500, kind of let him play around. But there's nothing about home ownership. The stock market to kids today is like a PS5 game. They all get together, they look at the charts, they look at the graphs, then they all lose money. They all lost their initial $500. So you reached out today specifically talking about home ownership, and we're trying to target the 18 to 30-year-olds, and there's different ways and there's different saving options for them, which we're to discuss.
And I think the biggest thing is, and I think why we're looking at 18 to 30-year-olds is the earlier you get started in this, the better the odds of you being able to own your own house.
Right.
Yeah.
And that. So, and there are a lot of, I mean, it started with my 22-year-old son asking me around January, February, what's this new account that the government has set up?
Right.
And should I open it?
I'd never even heard about it until last week.
I heard something about it.
Had you?
Yeah, something about it. But then when the budget came and all that sort of thing, it brought this to light.
That's right.
We're going to call it the FHSA. Is that what we're going to call it?
And that's probably the acronym that's going to stick with
it.
So
it's actually a first-time buyer's tax-free savings account?
It's close to that. So first home savings account.
Right, but that it actually is for first-time home buyers.
That's right. You can't have owned a property. If you're married, your spouse can't be owning a property. You can't be common law on a property. All of those exclude you from this.
Right, and this is brand new.
This is brand new. It was just introduced last year. but the legislation was just recently passed.
Okay.
Coming into place April 1 is when financial institutions like your big banks
Just
could
days
start
ago,
offering.
ladies and gentlemen. Just days ago, April 1. It was Saturday.
Ask Courtney how many banks are set up to open it, because I called 3
Right.
off the list.
So it should have been available to people to open an account from all indications on April 1st.
It should have been available by April 1. And Danny's right. There's not a single bank in Canada, to our knowledge, that has this account open yet.
As of today.
As of today.
today.
There is
What's this today? 4th?
The 4th.
4th. Yeah.
one financial institution or brokerage actually has it available, and that would be Questrade. And so you actually could go on today and you could open up an account, provided you meet the criteria. Now, everyone else, and you know, yes, the banks are a little bit behind the 8 ball. They're a little slow at getting to market. However, they have until the end of this year. So
Okay.
provided the account's open by the 31st of this year, I will say you don't lose the contribution room for this year.
Right.
Okay.
And this will be something that an 18-year-old, anybody of legal age, could open and start now.
for
For
sure.
$100, let's say. Just get it going.
And that's the best way to do it is. So what this account is this account allows you to contribute up to $8,000 a year for 5 years, and the intent is to build a $40,000, we'll say, down payment.
Sure.
And yes, we're in Ottawa, so that's not going to buy a lot. So it's part of the solution.
Right.
Won't
And
buy
it's-
anything in
and-
Chicoutimi.
Right. And it's more than what we had
Right.
before.
Yeah.
So
Right.
there's a few other tools in the toolbox that we can take to get you up to a down payment.
Right.
To buy that first home. So you're right, Dan. You said, as simple as putting in $100. Absolutely. On the financial literacy side, a lot of times we'll say, pay yourself first.
Right.
So you get your paycheck every 2 weeks. Set up with your bank, with your investment firm, to have $100 if you can swing it, $50 if you can swing it, going into an account. Once these accounts are open, then the FHSA, so First Home Savings Account, it's a mouthful.
First home savings account.
And it's tax-free.
And it's tax-free. And this acts like an RSP, which I'll also tell you, most 18-year-olds aren't familiar with what an RSP is.
Right.
On it. So let's say you earn income of $10,000 a year, and you would normally pay tax on that. If you put $1,000 into your FHSA, that comes directly. You don't pay tax on that $1,000. So that $1,000 gets sheltered, very much like an RSP does, and you get to essentially, if you would have been paying $200 or $300 in tax on that,
Right.
that $200 or $300 stays in your pocket.
Okay.
So it's a great vehicle for saving.
But more importantly, if a kid is 18 or 19 years old, they're in university or college, and they're putting away $100 a month, it's a mentality. It's a change in their mentality.
It's habit forming.
It's habit forming.
Yeah.
And they'll get to see it grow as they go through college, university, and then probably the RRSP would kick in, or opening up an RRSP account their first year of full-time employment. I don't see there wouldn't be any benefit prior to that,
Yeah.
unless they're earning over that
And it's
15 grand.
And again, I can't stress enough that for every individual, they're in a unique situation. So you can't take a brush and just paint it and say everybody should do this.
Different factors, different people, different situations, and different things apply.
Yeah. So, you first of all, you look and say, most 18-year-olds aren't earning 20, 30, 40,000. They're in school. They've got a part-time job. And you might say, why would I want a tax deduction right now? You're actually right. You probably don't need a tax deduction. And the good news is, while you put your money in the FHSA, you don't have to claim the tax deduction until you get out of college, you get into working full-time, you're earning $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year, and then that actually means money to you. So instead of getting $200 back on your $1,000 that you put in. You may get $300 or $400 back. And if you plan this appropriately or plan this correctly, I would say the government savings that the government's actually put in place here is between $10,000 to $20,000.
Okay.
So you put $40,000 of your money in, and through tax sheltering, you essentially can get another $10,000 to $20,000. So turn that 40 without talking about how it's invested. That's another conversation.
Right.
You can essentially take that 40,000 and turn it into 50 or 60,000.
Right.
From that side.
Right. Is that why there are limits on the amount you can contribute to these things?
I think so. I think part of it is, make no mistake about it. Everything the government does costs us money, right? So it's the more money that they allow to go into here, the less taxes they're collecting.
The less they're collecting.
That's right.
That's why it's limited.
Yeah.
Right. But and the limit's not bad.
It is not bad because so if you look at it, you put your $40,000 over, and we could be talking 10 to 12 years.
Right.
Like when you look at realistically,
But at least 5, is that?
When it's at least at a minimum, it's going to take you 5 years to put in.
Right.
You also have the ability to so let's say we have a scenario this year. Take my son for example. September he decides to put $200 into his FHSA, forgets about it. Then next year is doing really well in his job and says, "Listen, I can put my $8,000 in. I'd like to put more in." The program actually allows you to go back 1 year, providing the account's been open.
Right.
So if he had put, that $200 in, he could put $7,800 from last year,
And then an additional 8,000.
Right. So there's a little bit of carry back or carry forward room, I would say.
That's
Does he
nice
get
too.
the tax
That's a nice
benefit?
feature.
Does he get the tax benefit by putting that extra money in, unlike an RRSP?
He would get the tax benefit.
For the previous year?
Right.
Yeah.
But on the current year.
On the current
So you
year.
look again, if he claims it, but then I would also look and say, so let's just say an average, 20, let's just use the amount, say he's earning $30,000 a year and he puts 15,000 into the first time home savings account. If he claims that all in 1 year, he's going to get, maybe he's going to get $200 per thousand back. I would probably suggest, let's look at maybe claiming $3,000 or $4,000. So maybe he gets $800,000 back from that
Right.
$4,000 he claims. Then I would take that extra $1,000 and then I would go down the list. And the next program that's out there is the tax-free savings account. So then I would take the $1,000 and say, let's put this over into your tax-free savings account and use that, because we know 40,000 at the end of the day, including what it earns, is in investments, is not going to be enough.
Right.
So we've got to look to other mechanisms.
That's assuming that they don't. If they were able to put it in over 5 years, it could very well be enough to buy a house. Think 5 years down the road or 6 years down the road. If a 19-year-old or 20-year-old starts today and he's disciplined, maybe has a little help from the parents, you're looking at 5% down with CMHC 5 or 6 years from now. Is it reasonable that they could buy, a lower end property for $400,000 to $500,000? Because I'm looking at today, and you can buy property. You can buy condos today for under $400,000 now.
Sure.
So
Sure.
You get a buddy to rent with you 5 or 6 years down the road. I went to school with guys who did that.
Yep. Rent out
they-
a room and
They were one beer guys, we used to call them. They'd go out, they'd have a great night on a Friday or Saturday, and they'd nurse that 1 pint for the whole night, but they were banking their money.
Yeah.
One guy, Jimmy, who I know, he invested with
Good old Jimmy.
Jimmy.
I'd like to know Jimmy.
You know what he did?
It's got to be good old Jimmy. It can't just be Jimmy.
He,
Good old Jimmy.
when he was in grade 13, him and 5 buddies bought a house in the Glebe and tore it apart and renovated it and sold it. Probably the only one in Ottawa who thought like that
Right.
back in the day. But there's,
Yep.
so we're
So it
really
is
talking.
possible. So, yeah.
Here, though, we want to change the mindset of the youth today. It has to be a more positive outlook for them. And like up on the board, we're saying 18 to 30-year-olds. It's got to be, we see it, Kurt? 30-year-old couples. their mentality is, will we ever be able to buy a home?
Yeah.
Maybe if they had
And that's
started thinking about it at 25, they'd be there today.
But that's a general feeling,
Yeah.
in the broader community, right? That it's very difficult for first-time home buyers to get into the market, right? So here's an opportunity to set yourself up for a little bit of success. Yes, the limit is $40,000, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But think about if even if that doesn't cover
Right.
your entire down payment, it's a good chunk,
Right.
It's a very good
and
chunk.
it's a tax-free chunk.
And you mentioned a young couple, so the limit actually is double if you're married, or I'll say common law and haven't owned a place. So essentially, if
Well,
both
of
of
course.
you have good jobs,
Yeah.
and both of you can put $8,000 a year away, then $80,000 in a 5-year period.
That'll do it.
That'll do it.
Easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Easy. Then you're guaranteed.
Yeah.
You're guaranteed you can buy something.
Yes.
And you can also, and you may understand more in the fractional ownership and that, but based on what I've seen on the government's website, providing you have a 10% ownership interest in the property or more, then the first time home savings account would qualify. So hypothetically, you could have as you mentioned earlier, a few friends could say, listen, we're gonna go and buy a house together, and you could essentially multiply that $40,000
Right.
across. So there's different ways to get to that down payment using this program.
When it comes to the FHSA,
Yes.
is it in addition to, or is it separate from the traditional tax-free savings account?
It's separate. So it's another, so each year in your tax-free savings account, great question. So in your tax-free savings account, for example, in
Hear that?
2000 and
I know,
question.
great question.
Wait
I
a
was going to
second.
comment. That's a bell ringer.
there you go.
So yeah, the what is it? The tax-free TFSA.
So the limit for that annually right now in this year was $6,500.
Okay.
So potentially you could put $6,500 in that account, and it will grow tax-free.
Right.
So it's not the same as the FHSA in terms of you don't get to deduct it from your income when you file your tax returns.
Okay.
And that's why we go FHSA first,
Right.
tax-free savings account second.
But you could fill both.
Absolutely, you could fill both. And I'd look to
So
say
if you're a super saver,
you're a super
right?
saver,
or you get a
Maybe you're
you're
still living
lucky
at
and
home.
you're making $65,000 a year, right?
Got
Whatever.
a question.
absolutely.
So if you have, let's say you have $1,000 in each one of these accounts,
Okay.
could I go out and take that $1,000 and buy a GIC with it today
So, and that's
and keep it inside the account?
that's a
Because
great
we were
question.
talking, what's the
because-
return on a GIC today?
So depending on your term and the institution, so the big banks don't offer as much as some of the more independent
Right.
firms do. And GICs, just so everyone understands, they are guaranteed investment
Right. Good
certificates,
point.
and they're a guaranteed up to $100,000. You cannot lose your principal. If a company goes bankrupt,
So
you
they're
may take a
insured.
while to get it back. But they're insured up to $100,000 per institution.
Right.
Okay. So a lot of people look at these accounts and they put their money in and they make this mistake. They do it with RSPs, they do it with tax-free savings account, and I'm sure they're going to do it with first-time home savings accounts. Is they put the money in and it goes into a daily interest savings account. And that account might earn 1/4 of a point, maybe 0.5% if you're lucky. And
Very
they leave
very
it in
little.
there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And they go back 5 years later and look, and their money hasn't grown, and they wonder why. And so the GIC,
Rate of return on a 1-year GIC today
1-year
would be.
GIC is you can get 4.5 to 5%. Like,
So the question was, can I take that $1,000 in
Absolutely.
one of these accounts and then
Absolutely.
buy a 1 year
yeah,
and get a 4 to 5% return on it?
yeah.
And
Generally,
invest it back into your savings
Just
account,
roll it right back in.
right?
we generally like to use a rule of 7 in the financial planning industry in terms of
The
if
rule
you-
of 7?
it's the rule
That
of 7.
sounds cool.
It does
Every
sound.
7 years, if invested properly, you can double that investment.
Oh, okay.
So we're looking at the compounding effect in that. So
Absolutely.
Every
But-
7 years?
Absolutely. But if you just put it in where you're using 0.25%, you're not going to hit that as well. But conversely, there will be people out there that will look and say, you know what, I'm going to go to Questrade and I'm going to go into self-directed. So I'm going to buy my own stocks and I'm going to do great because Questrade and other firms will look and say, hey, since 2014, our portfolios have earned 60%, 70%, and the average individual will look and say, okay, this looks, I can do this, no problem. Well, you can lose money as well too. So this is money that you really want to be careful, and you want to look at how do you invest it. So you can own stocks, you can own fixed income like GICs within it. But again, every situation is unique.
Well, we're talking to the 18 to 30-year-old demographic.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to put this money into these accounts with the intention of using it as a down payment to buy a house, take your 4 or 5% on your GIC. And I'm not, a financial expert, but I know that sounds a lot better than having to wake up every morning and checking what your stocks did. Up and down, up and down.
Well, it's simple, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to manage.
Yeah.
Some people, like, I don't know anything about the stock market. Not a thing. Lots of people don't.
No, I don't.
Right? I don't.
I know land.
I do invest money, but through my financial institution, my financial advisor sort of thing, right?
Right.
But what I've invested in,
You don't know.
I don't know.
You get a statement at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And this is a challenge that I look at between real estate and the markets. And yeah, I kind of simplified, and I drive into my laneway every day, and there's not a price above the garage that says my house is now $20,000 more or $20,000 less. So I'm not going into the house panicking, going, oh my God, what did we do now?
Right.
Our house is down. The challenge when I look online and I look at my investments is, yeah, they're down 20,000, or last year was a horrible year in the market.
Right.
And people don't realize, they look and go, oh, I lost 10% last year or 15% last year. And then they look and go, oh, I made 10% this year, so I'm even. That's not how it works. If you lost 10% last year, you've got to make 20% to get back. And the risk that you want to take, do you want to take that risk? So there's so much emotion built into the market that I would be worried about 18 or 19-year-olds. Maybe you want to take 20% of your investments. It depends on the individual, but a small portion, and get your feet wet with maybe some exchange traded funds or some indexes that don't cost a lot. And you can kind of see, how are you going to react when that goes up 5% or down 10% in that. But the rest, let's be sure about it. This is your home you're talking about.
Right. And there's no, to me, I don't see any better investment, for a regular guy who doesn't know much about the market, but invests, in GICs and RSPs and all that stuff. But my house is, it's it, right? And I'm, I'm one of those people, I've driven down my mortgage to a reasonable rate, to a reasonable number, and looking forward to paying it off. And I'm like, that's good to me, right?
Absolutely.
It's money in the bank.
I mean, historically, that's what I'll say, Canadians, that's what we've done. Is our number one, our largest asset we have is our home.
Yeah, sure.
That's where all and it's in a way, it's forced savings. We've got to have our home. It's not disposable income. So every month that mortgage payment gets done, and it's a forced savings plan. And we're not then subject to the emotional.
And it could be said that the real estate market has never been outpaced by the stock market. You can go back 50 years.
No, I guess not, eh?
No, not even close.
No.
Not even close.
No, and I mean, the real estate market, sure, the value of your home ebbs and flows. Certainly in the last, 5 years, we've seen different fluctumulations at various times. And
for sure,
here in Ottawa, we're lucky because they kind of even out, and they're pretty well stable, even in tumultuous times in other markets. But it is very stable compared to what stock markets bring you, and you got to educate yourself, right?
You do, and you even look at it, and you look at, I'll say, grandparents today and parents, and what's the number one priority for them? their next generation, their
Right.
family. They want their family taken care of. And in intergenerational wealth, I've worked with a number of very high-end families in the city, and everyone has a consistent thought. We want to help our children buy their first home.
Right.
But we also, it's you can go to the grocery store and get food or learn how to grow your food, right? So this is a process where you learn how to actually save, and you learn the fundamentals of good budgeting, investing, and building your wealth, versus here's the keys to your house, and away you go. And easy come, easy go.
I would say, and this is just my opinion, but I think many people that have the same opinion, and for decades and decades, don't know why, but it has absolutely been the failure of the educational system not to introduce this mentality, or at least one course. Now, Kurt went back, he asked the question, are we sure it's not being taught in school? So my son's 19, so recent memory, graduated high school, great. Only once, and I helped him pick his courses, so I know there's nothing like this. But in one of his business courses, he in fact had an exercise where each student had to pick a home on MLS and purchase that home. And they had to come up with the budget required to buy it.
Yep.
There were a couple of things missing in terms of expenses. Land transfer tax was one.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
But you know what? But that's, he comes to me and a couple of his friends, and that's the only education he got on anything to do with home ownership. Forget about saving to buy a home. And like we were talking, you learn how to make an apple pie in home economics back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah, there was drafting, home economics, woodworking.
Yep.
I took those.
I took the home ec
I didn't
for
take
various
home ec.
reasons.
Yeah. I took typing for probably the same reason.
Right?
I think Courtney mentioned he did too.
Typing was very valuable.
Home ec. Learn how
It
to
turned
sew a
out to
button
be.
on.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
So how do we, the three of us are sitting here, we've all got kids, we know that's not being taught in school. So really, the purpose of today, should parents be talking to the kids? Because kids are online now. I don't know what information they're getting. Like I referenced
Well, the
before.
information's out there, the good information
Yeah.
and the bad. It's, how you sift through that is the question.
And what do they say? The facts don't lie, but statisticians do. It's how they're presented.
Oh, it's how you can.
At the end of the day, and that's where the danger is. You get an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old who they're in their first or second job, and they've got income coming in, and they're saying, "Hey, mom, dad, I want to do something with this money," and they put it in their normal checking account,
Right.
and they don't take advantage of the program that's out there, or they go into something that they know little about, and then they find out that they've lost money and they get discouraged,
Right.
and they go back to being risk averse and using that bank account where you get 0.25%. And the banks love you for that. They're happy because they're taking your money and investing it and lending it out, and they're making 4 or 5 times the amount on it, while you're stuck in this, pennies going into your account.
Yeah, I sit here and I understand what we're talking about and how, but it's best.
Still confusing.
It is still confusing because there's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of initials of things, right? Like the FHSA. It's best to sit down with somebody who knows, right?
Yep.
Like a financial advisor / planner.
Yep.
Right. And it's worth the time and whatever it costs you to do that.
Yeah, and I'd say even, if you're a parent looking at this or a grandparent and you've got an investment advisor or an investment counselor that you work with, I would call them up and say, listen, I want to bring in my son and my daughter. I want to bring them in. I want to have a discussion on financial literacy. I want to help them to understand what their options are for 2 reasons. One, you want them to understand, but as a parent, you also want to be there to continue to support. I don't think we ever stop parenting.
No.
Because there's not a certain age.
And
where
I
you say
want to
that's
learn
it.
for myself.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I don't see a downside to having, if you just pick the FHSA, the tax-free bank.
First home savings account.
Yes.
First home savings.
There's no downside for an 18-year-old to walk into his bank,
No.
either
Open
with
it
a
up.
parent or on his own, and just say, when is Scotiabank going to have this as an option?
Yeah.
I'd like to open one. I'd like to deposit a.
So what I'll say, so you could go on to your bank's website today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they all have, I took a quick spin around all of them. They all have a button on there where you can say, click here, and register, so that you receive an email or a notification or a text when the accounts are available to be opened.
Right.
So we're
Okay.
anticipating midsummer, most of them, and I'll say probably at the latest. If some of the big banks don't have them open by early fall, they're going to be missing opportunity. And you'll see, like Questrade right now, how many times have we mentioned it? They're open
Because
and
they're the only
taking
one.
accounts, and that's it. Only one in Canada.
Where's the product?
You know,
Where
if
is it?
kids
Where's the option?
well, it's not like the banks didn't have notice. I just
no.
don't- there's got to be a reason why it's not available now, because it's not like they didn't get notified that this was going to happen. I don't know when they did, but I'm sure they knew 6 months ago
So
or a year ago.
having been worked within two of the largest financial institutions in Canada, what I would suggest is the banks are typically dealing with legacy systems, and they're publicly traded companies, so they want to maximize shareholder value every quarter, and as a result, they build fixes on top of fixes, and with something like this, the technology, they have to almost recreate the technology to put the nuances, and this account has a lot of different nuances in to make sure they get it right. when
Yeah,
they
I don't
come
think
out.
it can be that difficult. I'm not buying into
I
that.
wouldn't.
No,
I'm
you know
surprised.
what? They
They were
make
told-
enough money to,
They were told mid
get
last
their
year.
shit together and have this ready.
Right. They were told mid last year that this was coming out,
Yeah.
and that the legislation would come into place
Yeah.
April 1. And guess what? The
There has to be a
legislation did come
reason.
in.
There has to be a reason, or that it be,
Yeah.
it's not just, they're behind the eight ball or they're slow to move on it. There has to be a reason, because the banks want your money.
Yep.
They want your money. But it's realistic by the sounds of it. It's realistic if an 18-year-old changes her mentality and starts thinking about purchasing a home or what can be done.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Keep
It's,
talking.
I will. I almost had to do that last week, by the way, as well. You saw me crossing my legs 3 or 4 times a minute. For an 18-year-old to start today with financial literacy, it is very realistic that by the time they're 30,
Easily.
12 years, that'll give them 4 or 5 years of post-secondary education, 5 or 6 years full-time in the workforce. If their mind starts thinking today about one less night a week in a bar and putting that money into one of these vehicles, they will own their first home before they're 30.
Yeah, it's attainable, and I mean, even in some of the big cities, like Toronto and Vancouver, where you're looking at $1 million or more for the average home price.
Yeah.
I'd suggest that now there is a nuance to this program as well. It has a 15-year limit, but within 15 years, using the first-time home savings account, the tax-free savings account, and your first-time home buyer's account, which again, this is another one, but that was part of the RSP.
Right.
That used to be what everybody used, is they would put money into their RSP and then they would take it out and they would use it towards buying a home. If you combine all of those together, within a 10-year period, you're talking $120,000, $130,000.
Can't you set yourself up for even automatic deposits into an account like that? Like that's, you talk about forced savings, but it's money you don't miss, and everybody always says that when you're talking about budgeting stuff. If you put it away and take it directly out, you don't miss
gone.
it. Well, it's true.
It's gone. That's right.
You don't
And you've
miss
already
it.
made that contribution. You can feel good about it because you know it's happening, but you don't really miss it.
Yeah.
Even if it's a small amount. Like I never trained myself to do that until later in life, and it makes me.
I have a 20-year-old daughter and a 22-year-old son and a 17-year-old daughter. The 17-year-old is the only one that's not doing monthly contributions because there are some restrictions in terms of owning your own account for stocks and that. You pretty much have to be 18,
Yeah.
Right.
And that. So, but at 18, my daughter works part-time, my older daughter works part-time, and my son works full-time. Every second week, they're contributing. Now, I don't think they're contributing enough, and that's where you have to revisit. So, yes, get started, start paying yourself. That paycheck comes in. I would set it up, if you can, to be literally the same day the paycheck comes in.
Yeah.
As little as $50, $100 comes in, and away you go. It goes directly into investments.
Yeah.
Then you can't spend it on drinking money.
Yeah.
You're not spending it on video games, which is what a lot are
And
spending
you're
on.
training yourself because you can look at it and see it
Yeah.
grow and go, okay, now if I add another $50 a month to my existing 50, that doubles what I'm doing. So let's see how that goes, right? And you start.
It becomes a cool thing.
Yeah.
It becomes cool.
Well,
They see
I've
the-
always, I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but when I was, younger in my early 20s, mid 20s, even late 20s, I was always impressed by friends I ran into and people I met that had set themselves up and already had their first home or whatever.
their
Like
first
it was
property.
like,
For their first car.
yeah, you'd be kind of jealous, right?
Yeah.
You'd be like, wow, how'd you do that? Well, I just put some money away. What? What do you mean?
And
So-
it's a discussion parents should be having with the kids too. That's where it's going
Yeah.
to start.
It is.
Well, in
Yeah,
most
we're-
homes, that's
Yeah.
where it'll start.
And educationally, I think we need to
We have to.
implement that. But I mean, I don't think we're the first three fellas sitting on a couch thinking of that, right? So it hasn't happened yet.
No,
it's not
but it
part of a
wouldn't be-
regular curriculum. It's life
No, and-
skills, right?
And it's, I mean, I do recall my youngest coming home and they were each handed out in school, you're a plumber, you're an architect, you're a banker, and they said, what are the average earnings? And then prepare a budget. And, it was let's say a week to a week and a half exercise. Now, think about that. 1 week to prepare you for something that you're going to need every month in the rest of your life.
Yeah, no, it makes no sense. Well,
Right.
it's a good exercise, but it should.
It's a start, but it just leaves everything hanging.
It has to be added to the curriculum.
And at
of
that
every
point, even that they talk a little bit about savings and that, but at that point, most of the kids have no income coming in. They have so they have no ability to start savings.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
school. But we also learned today that Kirk can bake an apple pie.
That's why I took home ec. It's not why I took home ec,
No, I took typing.
right? It just seemed like
Grade 10
fun.
typing right here.
There were,
Yeah.
there were more females in that class than,
And I'll tell you,
Less competition.
a friend of mine's father, who I think of fondly, and with the group of guys that I chum with, Jim Demra. He's long gone, rest in peace. But Jimmy used to sit us all around and go, when you go to buy your first property, buy as much property as you can with the money that you have.
right.
When he came back from the war, he used to tell the story. He first was with a realtor who was trying to buy him a home. And he met another realtor who is retired now, who said, no, your first home, try and buy, if you can buy a 3-unit with your down payment, buy a 3-unit. If you can buy a 2, buy a 2. And each one of his kids who were had the ability to go out and buy, they all bought investment properties, and many still own them. And Jimmy ended up owning a number of investments down there. So you don't have to limit yourself to that low-end condo. Sometimes the numbers, if you've got 60 or 70 grand to
plan
put
it right,
down, the
yeah.
numbers could make more sense to buy a duplex.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Buy a duplex. There's lots of opportunities,
And it's interesting,
but you have to start.
and some people can look and say, so what do successful families do? What does real estate mean to them? And pretty much generally accepted fact is, if you look at a family that maybe they've owned a business and they've done really well, their wealth down the road ends up being 25 to 40% in real estate.
Yep.
And so that's, at that stage, it's not as much about accumulating and building, it's about preserving it. So
Right.
from a risk perspective, It's a tangible asset. It's not going anywhere. It could be income producing, so it could be an investment property, no question. Could be your home, but
Yeah, it could be
adding
now
up-
or later an investment situation, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're talking, not quite half, but if you like real estate, you could almost have half your assets in real estate, and be.
Well, there's
sleeping at
people
night.
that there's people that do.
They do.
That's the thing, eh?
Yeah. Lots to explore. We're about out of time,
We're about out of time.
right? Courtney Anderson, some of you may know him as Razor. Is a
Razor
There's a story
Anderson.
there. We won't go there.
That's
today,
another
though.
podcast. It's probably another topic.
Yeah.
But Courtney is a financial planner, financial advisor. You've done a slew of things in the financial world, and we appreciate you dropping by today and sharing that information because it's great information.
Yeah, parents should start talking to their kids
Yeah,
about it.
it's important. Thanks for having me.
For sure.
because I'm passionate about it, and we got to start today.
We're gonna have you back and talk about more financial stuff that we don't understand. Well, maybe Danny Grimes would because he's a broker.
He's a broker.
Right,
yes.
he's a
Yeah,
broker.
yeah.
Whereas I'm a realtor.
My son is
I'm not a
19.
broker.
My son Thomas is 19 and is more financially literate than me.
Yeah. It's
I
ridiculous.
understand land.
Yeah.
I bought
Ridiculous.
stocks once in my life, and
Yeah.
it was just too much.
I leave that to the experts.
Yeah.
This is the Broker Loaded Podcast. It's a podcast all about real estate in its various shapes and forms.
It is.
This, I think, is episode 19
I believe so.
of our podcast. You can find
believe
us on YouTube, all the places where you find your favorite podcasts. We usually appear. Usually.
All the audio platforms, most of them, the top four.
Most of them. And we also have an email address if you have questions or topics you want us to discuss. It's
Brokerloadedpodcast@gmail.com.
good. I just forgot it there for a second, as you
Yeah.
would. We also have a Facebook page. You want to drop by there. And
YouTube channel.
yeah, you can subscribe to those. Is that what you do?
Yes, you
follow
can.
and subscribe and do all that. You can do that.
But we no longer will have our names and numbers along down here like we have.
Why not?
It became, well, first of all, if anybody wants to get hold of Kurt Studley, realtor, or
Yep.
Danny Grimes, broker,
Kurt at kurtstudley.com.
it's easy to get hold of. it. You
613-282-6066.
Mine's
I answer the phone.
613-552-3727.
Right.
Or just Google us and give us a call. But it's nice, as you may have noticed, I put the guest and contact information now down here.
Well, that's mighty fine of you.
Well, we have a coloring issue too, depending on, what
Right.
the text. So that's
Right.
that's a technical issue.
Hey, thanks for joining us on the Broker Loaded Podcast. We'll see you next time.
See you next time, guys.
Bye.
Thanks.